joining International Hindu University's weekly discourse. We are privileged to have one of our favorite speakers, Ms. Lavanya Arul from Singapore, talking to us today about Thirumurai number 8. This is her 5th discourse with us, and we are in the process of putting all of her recordings onto YouTube so that you would be able to access it and revisit as needed. Lavanya ji, by profession, is a project manager, but she is also an ardent, self-taught Thirumurai expert and has really learned Tamil, her native language, the grammar of Tamil, which is extremely difficult, so that she can understand and bring more insight into the Thirumurai. Thank you very much for being an inspiration to all of us, Lavanya ji. Namaskaram. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. சிவாய நம. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். சிற்றம்பலத்தான் திருத்தோழன் சுந்தரன் நற்றமிழ் மாலை அணிநாவலூர் கொற்றவன் நம்பியாரூரன் பேர் நாம் ஒரு காலோதினால் தப்பிக்கும் தீவினையேதான். திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். This is more like coming back home for me, honestly. So it doesn't sound very different, but I would want to take this opportunity to thank International Hindu University and the organizers, especially Shefali ji, for putting in a lot of effort in bringing these events together. And my sincere thanks to Swamiji as well, who has been supporting us throughout this project day in and day out. And also welcome back to all my friends who have been here since the first discourse that we had almost. In this particular session today, we are going to talk about the 8th Thirumurai. We have been talking about the last 7. Of course, we consolidated the first 3, and then 4, 5, 6 we consolidated. 7 we took it separately, and 8 also we are going to talk about it separately. Talking about this 8th Thirumurai, I'm going to plan this session in 3 ways, as in 3 sections rather. One is the history of the saint, because that is a beautiful history, so we need to be aware of that. The second one is the significance of this text, and the third one is the text itself, where we are going to talk about what kind of temple worship options are available, how has he approached the science part of what we are talking about, the modern medicine and modern astronomy and all these. And also he's talking about quite a lot of ancient games that as of today I don't think we even know how to play those games, but he's actually describing a little bit on that. And finally about how to wage a war. That is something interesting for us. I'm sure most of us will be interested to know who's our enemy and how do we need to strategize our war and how do we go about it. In the 4 parts of Saivism, what we have been talking about for the last 4 to 5 discourses, there are 4 folds. Basically, we call it as Sariyai, Kriyai, Yoga and Jnana. We have already been talking about the earlier sessions. We spoke about the 3 saints, basically Sariya, which is done by, mainly described to us by the saint called as Thirunavukkarasar, where he had the relationship with God as master and slave. The second path is the Kriya path, which is given to us or elaborated to us through Thiruñana Sambandar, where he took the option of a father and a son kind of a relationship. And the last month one we were discussing about was the yoga path, which was given to us by Nambi Arurar, more like a pali kind of a relationship, which is more relatable to us right now in this era. And today we are going to be talking about, or rather our thought process is going to be on the Jnana Marga. The Jnana is basically the way how we are going to talk about Guru Sishya Bhava. That is the way how we are going to approach this. And this has been given to us by the 8th Thirumurai, and we all know it is called as the Sikha Mantra, which is the most important one in when we are talking about chanting mantras. This is, I would also say that 8th Thirumurai has got two parts in it. One is called as Thiruvasagam and the other one is called as Thirukkovayar. The interesting fact over here is, or irony I would say, is it's a kind of oxymoron over here. Thiruvasagam is the most commonly read hymn in this entire planet, I would say. Anyone and everyone who is introduced to Thirumurai will first look at Thiruvasagam and they'll be reading that. On the contrary, Thirukkovayar is one of the most rarely read padigams because of the way how it is written, how it is composed and the meaning of it. There's a lot of complications in it. That's the reason it is one of the least read Thirupadigams even among people who are well versed in Thirumurai. That's a very contradicting two sets of texts that we are able to see in the 8th Thirumurai itself, which I think is very unique, which we don't see it in the other texts. So we also know that there is nothing as accidental in Saivism, or rather even in Hinduism itself. We don't say everything is predestined and there is nothing called as accidental. Giving this, especially this particular Thirumurai, 8th Thirumurai, which is basically Thiruvasagam, giving Thiruvasagam the 8th place is so significant, and we can see that it is not accidental. There was some plan going on where Lord Shiva had already decided that, because the number 8 is very, very unique and it actually resembles the journey of our life. You see the way how we write 8, right? It starts from the top. So we are all coming from God, right? So we are coming down to earth, and then we live all our life and go through all these sufferings and the vicious karmic cycles and all these. End of the day, what is our objective is to go back. So the number 8 is very, very significant, and Thiruvasagam will help us in reaching back to God very soon. That is why number 8 is called as the number of liberation as well. So we need to get liberated and travel back to God, and one way of doing that is going to be through the 8th Thirumurai also. This is written by a saint called as Thiruvadavurar. Thiru is basically an equivalent of Shri, right? So it's basically an equivalent of that. His original name is Thiruvadavurar. His original name is Vadavurar, and with respect we call it as Thiruvadavurar, and he's from Madurai, our Swamiji's native basically. Those days the word Tamil Nadu belonged only to Madurai. That was an interesting fact that we can always relate with. Today, if you look at the state of Tamil Nadu, right, it's actually quite broad, quite big, I would say. But originally, even in the 11th and the 12th centuries, if you look at the text, the word Tamil Nadu was only for Madurai, and that was in the way how they represented. The other places were all called based on the power or the rulers and all these. For example, if you talk about Chola kingdom, that was called as basically it's called as Chola kingdom because it was ruled by the Cholas itself, and it is called as Chola Nadu. And if you look at it as of today's Tanjore district. And when you talk about Chera, Cheras are basically the today's Kerala, right? So it was ruled by Chera king, so it was called as Chera Nadu. So if you look at it, it was all based on the geographical dispersion was based on the rulers, but the word Tamil Nadu was only for Madurai. So we can see that our saint is from the proper Tamil Nadu. Yeah. The period of our saint is a little bit debatable. Some claim that he should be from the 3rd century because of the way how the poets have been written and based on various researchers. But the literary research and criticism unit, looking at the way how the poetic structures and the way how it is phrased and all these, they say that it resembles a much later period. Probably they say it should be around the 9th or the 10th century. Whatever it is, we don't know the real period of our saint, but all we know is this has been true, and we are able to relate with the text easily. There is another text called as Thiruvilayadal Puranam, and most of the historical events that we are able to see in this particular padigams, we are able to see a reference back in Thiruvalayadal Puranam. So we are able to relate with that particular text to come up with some kind of a basis or the foundation of our saint. Basically, when you look at, I'm going back to the history of our saint, yeah, from Madurai, the proper place Madurai, right? There is another place called as Vadavur, and this is around 20 kilometers, around that, plus or minus, yeah, 20-ish probably. This place, there is a holy shrine, and it is called as Vadavur itself, because it was worshipped by Vayu Bhagwan, so it is called as Vadavur. Our saint's father, his name is Sambhupada Irudayar, and mother Sivanyanavadi, that is his mother's name. When he was young, obviously he was grown in a very Saivite family, very devoted family. So he was named as Badavura because following the shrine in that particular temple itself, he was intellectually very well grown and spiritually very inclined person when he was in his young age itself, and because of that he started becoming more and more popular in that place. At that particular time, the king who was in that particular place, his name is Arimartana Pandya. He was he was able to, I mean, today we are calling it as osmotic communication, right? Probably through osmotic communication, he came to know about our saint. And because the saint was so talented at a very young age, he was offered the position of chief minister in the kingdom, which our saint willingly accepted. And while he was assuming this position, he was given the title called as Tennavan Brahmarayan. That was the title that was given to Thiruvadavurur. He took up his duties, and he was excelling in his duties as well. There was no doubt about it, because he was fully dedicated to his work, and whatever he was doing, there was a lot of intellectual thought process and all these that was going in place. And on one auspicious occasion, there was a news that in the kingdom nearby, there's a harbor place, the harbor city. There were some Arabian horses that was coming in, that was shipped back, and it was ready for sale. So the king instructed the chief minister, obviously the chief minister, right? So Badavura, to visit the place, the harbor, and buy the horses for their army. Upon this instruction, Badavura took whatever money he needs, right? So he took all the money, and then he was making his journey. He started his journey. Before that, he went to the temple in Madurai to seek the blessings of the deity over there, and then one fine day he left for the harbor city. On his journey, he was visiting a couple of temples, like what we do now, right? So whenever we go to India for a holiday, obviously when we are visiting our relatives, we would see in the map which is the nearest temple, and we'll just have a quick pay a homage over there, right? That's exactly what I guess Thiruvadavurur also did. So he was paying his visit to the temples over there, and when he was nearing a place called as Thiruperindurai, that is the old name. Right now it is called as Avudayar Koil. It's called as an Avudayar Koil, and it's a very, very beautiful temple, a must visit temple rather, I would say. This particular Thiruperindurai temple, the temple was not there, but he was actually visiting that particular place, and that is the miraculous place for our saint. Lord Shiva, disguised as a guru. Remember, he did not send a guru. He himself disguised as a guru, and he was waiting for Vadavurur. The beauty is, if you look at it, or rather the irony is, today we are running behind someone and in search of guru. But you look at the way how our saint was so matured that Lord Shiva was waiting for our saint. So we can see what kind of a dedication that he had. And one beautiful aspect over here is the formless Shiva took a form just for the sake of a true disciple. All we have to do, the lesson for us is, all we have to do is just be sincere in what we do. He was only a chief minister, but he was very sincere in his work. and because of that Lord Shiva came. Of course, his mind and his thoughts and everything was more matured. Probably that's also one of the reason. But when we are sincere in whatever we are doing, obviously there will be a lot of betterment from there. Unknowingly, Vadavudar, when he was crossing that place, he feels a pull over there towards the guru. The guru was sitting over there, and he feels a pull, and the pull is so strong that he is not able to deviate from there, or he was not able to break that. So he was just going towards the saint, the so-called guru, right, our Shiva, and he was just going over there, and he's actually explaining this in his own words. In Shiva Puranam, he's actually talking about this, the way how he was attracted. He even uses an analogy. He says, oh, I was like an piece of iron, whereas Lord Shiva, the guru over there, was like a magnet, and I was just pulled like an iron piece into a strong, powerful magnet. When Vadavudar is trying to enter the place, he sees a gorgeous guru sitting underneath a tree with all his students. And subconsciously, he was pulled towards the guru, and that is where he goes down, and then he bows down to the guru, and the guru just calls him, and he places guru's feet on the head of our saint, which is Thiruvasagam. In Saivism, this is called as the ultimate level of Diksha. Basically, there are few varieties of Diksha that we will usually talk about. One is called as the Nayana Diksha, which is like the guru will look at the Sishya. It is something like fishes. If you look at the fishes, right, there will be a school of fish. They will just lay eggs in the water, and they will just be swimming around. Whenever the time is maturing, the mother fish, will just look at the eggs, and the eggs will start hatching. This is what Nayana Diksha, logic behind Nayana Diksha is. The second one is Parisa Diksha, which is basically what we are able to see with our hens and birds and all these. They lay eggs, and they give the necessary warmth and the touch and all these, so that the eggs can mature. The next one is Manasa Diksha. Manasa Diksha is basically from the thoughts itself. It is something which resembles the turtles. If you look at the turtles and the tortoise, right, they will just lay eggs on the shore, and then they will just vanish into the sea. When the time matures, these turtles, the mother turtle, right, will just have a thought about the eggs, and the eggs will hatch. So this is how the stages of Diksha happens. So the guru will bring the disciple into his thoughts, into his heart, cleanse him, and then he will initiate in the path of Saivism. And the last stage is what we call it as Thiruvadi Diksha, which is basically placing this is the ultimate level, where the guru will place his foot on the forehead of the disciple, and that is considered to be the ultimate level. There is no particular order for these Diksha. If you look at it, there is no particular order, or we can't say which comes first and which comes second. For some of them, it can be done in a parallel manner. Some it can be done in a sequential manner. It depends on the individual's maturity level. So there is no particular sequence that has been defined. Vadavudar itself, when he is singing Manivasagar, he is also called as Manivasagar because of his words are like ruby. Manikam means ruby. So his words are like ruby. So it's he's also called as Manikkavasagar. He gives with his own statement, he says, Inayar Thiruvadi en Talaimel Vaithalume Tunayana Sutrangal Attanayum Turandolinde. He says, whoever was my relative. You can interpret this into two ways. When the guru placed his foot on my head, I let go all my relations, all my relatives, all the entanglements. We can interpret these relatives in two manners. One is the physical relatives that we are seeing around us, like mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever it is. Alternatively, the entanglement that we have since our very first birth all the way until our very last birth. We don't know when we started this particular birth cycle. We don't know when it is going to be finished as well. But the entanglement that we have within us, which is called as Arnavam, Kanvam and Maya, these three can be broken, has to be broken, and that can be done only by the guru. That is what he's actually talking about. Now let's look at this, going back to the story again, the history again. After this incident, our saint was in a full blissful state, because he's already in a realized state, right? So he's in a blissful state. He forgot everything. He even forgot why he started his journey. He forgot where he was heading towards. He forgot everything about the horses, whatever. And he was just with his guru itself. So he was asking the guru, okay, guru, now what is my work? What should I do? The guru looked at him and he said, okay, build a temple over here. He started building a temple. Now we will usually have spies in a kingdom, right? Some of the spies went back to the king and they said, you know what, your chief minister is doing a temple building work rather than going and buying horses. The king got really wild. He could not digest this. He thought that our Vadavurur has already cheated him. So he summons Vadavurur, which is the chief minister. So he summons back to the court. And our chief minister was a little bit worried. So he goes back to the guru, and the guru says not to be afraid, not to be scared. Send a message again to the king saying that on this there's a particular date, and that particular date the horses will be coming in. So he sends a message and everything is done, and then he also goes to the kingdom, because the king has already summoned him, right? So he goes back and then he is talking to the king, and he gives a particular date. 2 days, until 2 days before that particular stipulated date, there was no symptom of any horse coming into the kingdom. There was none, absolutely none. So the king confirmed that our chief minister has lied and he's cheated. So he just imprisons chief minister Vadavurur. This did not really bother our chief minister, because he was already in a realized state. So he did not bother. He was just chanting the mantra, Shivaya Nama mantra, and he was in the prison happily thinking about God. On that particular day that was promised to the king, Lord Shiva came in. He looked at all the wolves and foxes around in that particular place, converted them into horses, and he came in as the warrior, bringing in the horses to the palace. Looking at these horses, because when you talk about the horses, right, even for today, when they are choosing horses for races and all these, they usually see some of the symptoms, like, they look at the curls and all these. So the king was looking at it and he was like, gorgeous horses. He has never seen such horses in his lifetime. So he was so pleased. He releases Vadavurur from the jail, and he goes and he praises the warrior who brought in, which is Lord Shiva, right? So he was praising, and then he gives a chain or a shawl, something like that, to the warrior. The warrior, who's Lord Shiva, cannot accept anything from a human, right? So what he does is he just gets it with a stick. This insults the king. The king took it in a very insultful manner. He got wild and he was getting angry. Realizing this situation, our chief minister immediately came down and he said, okay, this is basically their culture, the Arabian culture. They are not supposed to get something from us, and that is the reason he's behaving that way. So the king was convinced. I mean, basically chief ministers are good in their communication and persuasive skills, right? So he convinces the king, and the king is like perfectly okay after that. And after this journey goes on. I'm not going into too much of this. What happens, just to cut the story short, that particular night, the horses turns back into foxes and wolves, and to make it worse, they start hurting the real horses in the shelter. This makes the king more wild, and the king orders to torture Vadavurur by making him stand in the real hot sun in the sand of Vaigai river. And in order to save him, Lord Shiva brought in floods, and that the story goes on, and it's an interesting story to think about it. Let's discuss about it in some other time. We can see how playful Lord Shiva's his leelas were, so yeah, he's also having some kind of leela, but we call it as Thiruvalayadal, yeah, so his playful approaches and all these. After all these have completed, Vadavurur decides to resign his job and totally get into the spiritual life. That is where he resigns his job and he goes back to Thiruperandurai, completes the temple construction and all these, and then he starts his journey. Now I'm going to talk about the significance of this text, because this text is the most important one, as I was mentioning. Our saint, after renunciating his duties, he visits most of the temples and he sings a lot of praises of Lord Shiva, which is basically compiled as our 8th Thirumurai, which is called as Thiruvasagam. This is believed to be handwritten by Lord Shiva himself. It's believed that Lord Shiva came down to Vadavurur and he said, by now he's not Vadavurur anymore, he's called as Manikkavasagar. So he came down to Manikkavasagar and said, I want all your text, I want to take notes. But he came in a very disguised manner, not as Lord Shiva, and he took notes of all those, he tied it and he left it in Chidambaram when the doors were closed, right? So he left it over there. The next day, when the priests opened the door for prayers, right, for the normal prayers, when they opened the door, they saw this text over there in palm leaves. They did not understand the meaning, so they brought it back. When they were confused on what is the meaning and all these, there was an echo from inside of the temple saying that go and check with Manikkavasagar. They brought in to Manikkavasagar to ask what is the meaning of this text. All Manikkavasagar did was he said the meaning is Lord Shiva himself, and that's it. So if you look at it, the meaning of the 8th Thirumurai is Lord Shiva himself. This we are able to see from the life history of Thiruvasagam itself. Not only that, this is one significance of the text. The next significance, which we all keep talking about in a very, very fantabulous manner, is in the 18th century, G.U. Pope. There was a person called as G.U. Pope. He came down from Italy to South India through a missionary, and his only objective was to convert people to Christianity. When he was taking up this particular duty, he wanted to learn Tamil, and so that he can communicate in the same language so that his work can be more simplified. So he went on asking for learning Tamil. The first text that was taught to him was Thirukkural. After that, he was asking for any other religious text. Fortunately, he was given Thiruvasagam. The moment he read Thiruvasagam, he understood Thiruvasagam, he could not control his tears. He was the one who named Thiruvasagam as bone melting song. And it is believed that whenever he writes a letter back to his missionary, he starts with a Thiruvasagam quote and he finishes with a Thiruvasagam quote. And whenever he writes the Thiruvasagam quote, he always has tears on the letter. And he doesn't want to wipe that because he felt that Thiruvasagam is worth the tears. He did I would say that that's the best work. He converted, or he translated Thiruvasagam into English. As of today, one of the best English translations in the world. You can imagine it was done by an Italian missionary person. So even today, if you look at it, you can search it in the internet. There's a lot of books available. There's a lot of publications that is available. You can just search for Thiruvasagam translation by G.U. Pope, and it is available, very easily available book, and that is considered to be the best work as of today, right? So these are some of the significance that we are able to see. And as I said, one more significance is one of the most commonly read text in this globe, I would say. Whoever is introduced to Thirumurai, the first thing they will do is read 8th Thirumurai compared to the other Thirumurais. The holy hymns of Thirumurai, as in Thiruvasagam and Thirukkovayar, as I was mentioning, there are sister documents. Thiruvasagam has got 51 padigams. Thirukkovayar has got 400 verses. It's not padigams, it's all verses, like 4 lines, right? So 400 verses. Thiruvasagam is written in a much more simplistic manner, simple language. Even those of us who are not Tamil literature trained, we can read and understand Thiruvasagam in an easy manner. That is one reason why it has become very popular among people who are reading Thirumurai. On the contrary, if you look at Thirukkovayar, it is not very easy to interpret. It's in Tamil there is something called as Aga Ilakkana. There's a lot of grammatical areas that we need to know, and also a very hard literature concept that we need to be comfortable before we can even read Thirukkovayar. That makes it a little bit challenging. Not only that, it is written in the form of something like a Platonic love kind of an approach. That is how it is written. Thirukkovayar is written. That is also one of the reason why not many people touch that, because of the language. The language is very, very hardcore Tamil, and only literature trained people can actually look at the text itself. So that is one of the challenge. Now let's look at the way how this particular Thiruvasagam is being used. Let's start with temple worship. Any point in time, whenever we say worship, the first thing we will say is, have you visited temple? We don't consider worshipping at home as, worship. The moment we say, oh, today I prayed, the first question they'll ask is, which temple? They won't say, oh, did you worship at your home? By default, we don't even recognize that or realize that. So temple worship is one of the most significant one. It starts with Thiruvasagam and it concludes with Thiruvasagam. If you look at it, there is a padigam called as Thirupalli. Thirupalli means waking up Lord Shiva, right? Of course, Lord Shiva is not going to sleep. If he sleeps, what is going to happen to us, right? And then again, the next question is which time zone? Because in Singapore, it's already midnight, and for you guys, it's just early in the morning. So it's going to be a lot more confusion. So we are going to talk about it in a more logical manner. Lord Shiva doesn't sleep, so he doesn't need to wake up. Who is sleeping is only the soul. So who needs to be woken up is only the souls. So instead of waking up individual souls, all we are doing is waking up the king. Once he wakes up, all of us will automatically get up. That is the logic behind Thirupalli. And if you look at the very last festive, or I can't call it as a festive, but the puja that we do in a temple is the conclusion one, right? That is concluded with Ponnusal. So if you look at it, it starts with Thiruvasagam in Thirupalli and it concludes with Ponnusal, which is also from Thiruvasagam. Now in between, we do have a lot of work in a temple, right? So for example, when we talk about consecration, if we want to consecrate a deity, the first thing we will need to do is we need to plan for the place, and then we need to plan for all the so-called paste that we have. We don't have cements in a temple, right? Rather, we have this kind of Ashtabandhan. The Ashtabandhan is basically, there is a padigam for how do we need to break that also. This is called as Thirupochunam. So the Ashtabandhan medicines that we are preparing, while we are doing that, there is a particular space, there is a particular way, there's a particular rhythm of making the powder. So that is done through Thirupochunam. And obviously when we say temples, we should be thinking about flowers, right? Of course, I don't think in Singapore and US we do have the luxury of having a beautiful garden or an orchid and then going and plucking flowers or picking the right flowers and all these. I don't think we have the luxury. But whenever we have the opportunity, we need to just not go near the plant and just take it up. Rather, there is a padigam for that. It is called as Thirupuvalli, which is to say how you need to choose the right flower, how you need to pick it from the plant itself in such a way that it doesn't hurt the plant. The padigam is beautifully designed in such a way that it tells us how, step by step, about how to take the flowers and how to make it into a garland or whatever kind of an approach, and then how we are going to place it for Lord Shiva. Another very important padigam that we should always be thinking about is, let's imagine, I think right now we need this as well. A temple which is not having Kumbhabhishekam for a very long time. Imagine we are not having money, or the resources are not available to perform the right kind of repair works and then to do a Kumbhabhishekam. We are lacking in our resources. Is there a padigam for that? Yes, and it is from Thiruvasagam. In Singapore, there was a temple where we had this difficulty. There was a lot of delay in happening in the Kumbhabhishekam. We organized we organized something called as a mutrodal. We call it as a mutrodal, where we just sing the entire padigam. We kept this as one of the requests and we chanted, and within 6 months everything was sorted out. So you can see wonders happening with this particular padigam. I'm not talking about a simple function. I'm talking about something like Kumbhabhishekam. You guys know how difficult it is, how expensive it is, how resourceful it is, right? And that can be easily achieved once we surrender ourselves to Lord Shiva and sing this padigam. The next one that I would want to touch on is the science in Thiruvasagam. Quite a lot of scientific approaches are there, but due to the time restriction, I'm just going to touch only on a few of it. The first one is NASA. When you talk about the NASA's findings on galaxies and the way how our planets are rotating and how many planets are there, how many galaxies are there, right now NASA is launching all these papers. In Thirumurai, there is a padigam called as Thirumurai, and this in almost, if you talk about the papers that has been given to us by NASA, probably the 17th or the 18th century, that's where the Western world is actually giving us, right? But even before that, almost in the 9th or the 8th century, or even if you take it as 11th or 12th century, it doesn't matter. But we do have documented all these, and that is exactly what NASA is projecting right now. And if you look at it, sometimes you will be wondering, when I sit in a hot sun, right? Imagine I'm sitting in a hot sun, fully sweating, right? And I'm in the earth. The first doubt I will have is, if I'm sweating so hard and I'm in the earth, if I'm getting to the space, am I going to be burnt down to death? The answer is no. Because in space it is cold. If you look at space, the temperature is minus 126 degrees Celsius. Of course, you guys talk in Fahrenheit, we talk in Celsius. So if you look at it, it is way, way, way colder. It is in negative. How is that possible? A place which is very close to sun is in a freezing temperature, whereas in earth, it is burning hot. How is this possible? Logically, it is not, and the scientific reason is determined in Thiruvasagam also, and there is something we call it as Kelvin. If you look at it right now, NASA is using the word Kelvin when they want to measure this. This is exactly what Thiruvasagam has given us. They say the temperature is not about the rays from the sun, rather how many particles are moving. In earth, the atmospheric pressure and all these, quite a lot of molecules are moving, and that is the reason the heat is formed. In space, absolute nothing, so it is much colder. Can you believe all these are in Thiruvasagam? In Thirumurai, we are able to see the scientific proof for this. The next one that I want to touch on is the scanning. If a lady conceives in her womb, what is going to happen in the first month, second month, third month, fourth month, fifth month, all the way until the 9th month? Right now we have scanning machines. We are able to monitor the growth. We are able to see each and every stage of the growth of the baby. But there is a padigam called as Potri Thiru Agaval, in which Manivasagar is actually talking about what happens for a fetus in the first month, second month, all the way until the 9th month, and so on. He's explaining it in a beautiful manner. When you read it, honestly, you will get goosebumps. You will be like, wow, how did they even think about all these? Just because with the yogic power, they were able to come up with all these. Darwin's theory of evolution, you're able to see that in Potri Thiru Agaval as well. Not only that, if you look at the Navratri, right, we have this in one of the most important ritual that we do during Navratri is to have the dolls arranged in the steps and all these, right? We call it as a kolu. That is beautifully given in Siva-Puranam. Puranam itself. Pullai, Pudai. So he talks about the stages. what should be the first step, what should be the second step, what should be the third step. So he actually talks about all these, which is resembling Darwin's theory of evolution, but also it talks about how you need to place, and this goes back to our the senses as well. One sense, second sense, third sense, fourth, fifth, sixth. It actually goes on with that as well. So we are able to see a lot of scientific reference in Thiruvasagam. We are not able to see to in the extent that we are seeing in Thiruvasagam. We are not able to see in the other Thirumurais, I would also say. The next one is, as I was mentioning, the games that girls play. Okay, now I know I'm touching on a very, very sensitive part, because I know our part of the world, when we say girls game and boys game, then we talk about it as a, genderism or a sexism. I'm not getting into that, but those days there were significant games that it was allocated for girls and for boys separately. But today, none. If you look at it, girl baby or boy baby, they all love to play with computers and iPads, and they play the same game. There is no distinction. But back those days, it was totally different. And if you look at it, there's a game. I remember even I had played this game. Like two groups of people would be there. One group of girls would be asking a question. I think in some of the movies also we have seen this kind of an arrangement. One group will ask a question. In the same rhythm, the other team must answer the question, and whoever loses, they will whoever loses are basically removed from the game. This is one of the very authentic game, and we are able to see that even in today's life. In this arrangement, in this particular pattern, there is a padigam also. It's a beautiful padigam where you will be able to see the vibrant, energetic approach in this particular padigam. It goes this way. Pusubadum venneeru poonbaduvum pongaravam pesuvadum tiruvayal marai polum kaanedi. Now the next team will start. Pusuvadum pesuvadum பூண்பதுவும் கொண்டென்னை ஈசனவன் எவ்வுயிர்க்கும் இயல்பானான் சாழலோ. So it's like argument, literally like an argument. One team will ask a question, another team has to answer that. Similar to this, one more song. என்னப்பன் எம்பீரான் எல்லார்க்கும் தான் ஈசன் துன்னம்பை கோவணமா கொள்ளுமது என்னேடி மண்ணு கலை துண்ணு பொருள் மறை நான்கே வான் சரடா தன்னையே கோவணமா சாத்தினன் கான் சாழலோ. So it's like literal argument, but it will be full of energy. Trust me, whenever we read this padigam, right, the two teams, we will actually form two teams and we will be singing this. And literally we will be jumping while we are singing this, and you can't control it. It's such an energetic song. Yeah. Same ways, there is today we have a game called as Coco, right, or Go. They call it as Go, or they call it as Coco. In the same manner, there is a padigam also. There is a padigam to sing in that manner as well. As of today, we have another padigam to talk about, is especially when we are having some kind of a very difficult situation, right? Like an enemy is there and he is actually confronting us just right in front of us, and we really don't have a choice. In that case, there is a padigam. When we sing that, and I think I have used this for so many situations, so many occasions, and when you read that, you will be able to see that, the enmity is just gone, just like, feathers or snow. I would say it just goes off. வளைந்தது வில்லு விளைந்தது பூசல் உழைந்தன முப்புறம் உந்தி பர ஒருங்குடன் வெந்த வாருந்தி பர உந்தி பர உந்தி பர உந்தி பர உந்தி பர. There are about 20 verses in this. When you keep singing this, you will be able to see whoever was in front of us, just like that, everything will be vanishing. You will get out of the situation in a jiffy, and as if there's nothing, without any no emotional turmoil, no physical abuse, nothing. You will just get out of it. Such a beautiful Padigam. Now I can hear a mind voice from you guys. How come a chief minister is talking about all the games that a girl can play? Doesn't he talk about waging war? And that's going to be our conclusion part. Yes, we are also going to talk about waging a war. Since he was a chief minister, obviously he will be touching about that, right? Nevertheless, let's to mention, he has spoken about how we need to plan, strategize when we want to go in a war and win our enemy. Now the next question we'll ask is, who's our enemy here? Obviously, we are not talking about an enemy who's a person who's standing in front of us. No, this is the internal enemy. It is not external, it is internal. Who's our enemy? Internal enemy is our desire. Now imagine we have this karma, we have this maya, we have all these kind of entanglements around us, which is bringing us back to this birth, vicious cycle of birth again and again and again. How do we break that? How do we strategize this war? And he says, you know what? You are in the middle. The first row that you have, which is the fatal role, if you guys have watched the movies that you are able to visualize, right? So the first row will be the fatal, the most fatal row, because the first hit will be for them. And you know what Manikkavasagar is talking about? The first row is nothing but our satsang. Our satsang partners are in the first row. You know why? That's the most important one. When you are in a satsang 1 hour or 2 hours, you will not have any other thoughts. You will only be thinking about this. You will only be talking about this. Nothing else is going to bother your work related issue, family related issue, medical related issue, economics related issue. Nothing is going to bother us. We will only be in a blissful state, talking and laughing and singing about the Lord, and we'll be just out of this maya. If not, what will happen is we'll be just sucked into the whirlpool of the maya around us. So in order to break that, the first level of defense is your satsang. And then he says the second row. The second row is made out of bhaktas. Bhaktas are always in a very blissful state. They keep singing and all these. Even when we are quiet, we are not within our satsang. We are just keeping quiet to ourselves. We all know idle mind is devil's workshop. Instead of that, when when the next level of bhaktas are there, they will always be singing praises, holy hymns that will channelize our thoughts, or rather, because we do have a strategy, we do have a target, but there is a high possibility we'll deviate. So all we have to do is just realign and realign. This is what waging a war is all about. And the third row is made of yogis, because yogis are the ones, they don't only control themselves, they can even control us. When our guru knows that we are deviating our path, he'll be like, okay, come back. We need someone to guide us back. That is the third row. And the fourth row is the siddhas. The siddhas, that is basically the protective layer, which is taken in a more proactive manner, who can safeguard us not only in our spiritual path, but also to make sure that we don't deviate halfway. This is the war that is the most important one, that all of us must be ready to face, ready to launch as well. So, conclusion, I've briefly touched on the history of our saint Manikkavasagar and the significance of the holy text, which is called as Thiruvasagam and Tiruchitrambalam Kovayar rather, and some significant parts of the text, like for example science, the medicines and all these, and then the ancient games and war, and also the temple worships and all these. So briefly I've touched it. There's a lot of options, as I said. Translations are available, and a very easily available text is Thiruvasagam. I would request you guys to have a look at it, and you will also enjoy the bliss of it, honestly. I would like to thank all of you for giving me this wonderful golden opportunity to think about the 8th Thirumurai, because this is a very, very auspicious Thirumurai. Whether someone knows to read proper Tamil or not, it doesn't matter. Whether they know to sing or not, it doesn't matter. This particular Thirumurai is a feast for anyone, who just wants to get into the path of Saivism. So I think you have given me a golden opportunity for this. I would like to thank one and all again, once again. தென்னாடுடைய சிவனே போற்றி, எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் இறைவா போற்றி, அண்ணாமலையம் அண்ணா போற்றி, கண்ணாரமுத கடலே போற்றி. சிவசிவ திருச்சிற்றம்பலம்.